The hall was packed, cameras flashing from every corner, as the foreign dignitary took the stage with an air of superiority. It was supposed to be a simple diplomatic event, a platform for dialogue and cooperation. Yet, within moments, the atmosphere shifted. Instead of building bridges, the visiting leader let arrogance lead the way, making remarks that cut deep into the pride of Burkina Faso. The audience sat frozen, their expressions caught between disbelief and outrage. Words, after all, can wound more than weapons. And here, in front of the world's press, an insult had been delivered, not just against a man, but against an entire people. The insult wasn't subtle. It wasn't dressed in polite language or hidden behind careful diplomacy. It was blunt, almost mocking, the kind of language meant to remind everyone who held the upper hand. Burkina Faso, the foreign leader said with a smirk, should remember its place. Small nations cannot dictate terms to the world. Laughter followed, not from the Burkinabe crowd, but from a few foreign delegates who found the condescension amusing. Cameras clicked, microphones recorded, and the sting of humiliation spread like wildfire through the hall. But among the crowd, one man sat still. His posture was steady, his gaze unflinching. It was Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the young leader who had risen at a moment of crisis to carry the weight of his nation. He listened without interruption, his face betraying no sign of anger or offense. To some, this silence may have seemed like weakness, a sign that the insult had landed without resistance. Yet those who knew him, who had seen his character, recognized it for what it was: restraint, the calm before the storm. When the foreign leader finished, applause came half-heartedly from his entourage, while the Burkinabe representatives sat stiffly, unwilling to endorse words that belittled them. The silence was heavier than any protest. All eyes turned to Traore, waiting to see if he would simply brush it off, if he would swallow pride for the sake of politics, or if he would choose another path. The pause stretched on, the weight of expectation thick in the air. And then Traore stood. The room hushed instantly. His presence, though unaccompanied by grand gestures or forceful movements, carried the kind of authority that commanded attention. He did not begin with anger, nor did he raise his voice. Instead, his tone was calm, deliberate, the kind of tone that makes every word impossible to ignore. "Excellency," he began, "you speak of remembering one's place. Allow me to remind you, our place is not beneath your feet, nor at the mercy of your laughter. Our place is in the heart of Africa, among proud people who refuse to bow to arrogance." The contrast was immediate. Where the foreign leader's speech had been laced with arrogance, Traoré's response carried dignity. Where the insult had sought to diminish, the reply elevated. And the more he spoke, the more the balance of the room shifted. The cameras that had eagerly captured the insult now swung toward Traoré, recording every word, every measured expression. "You see weakness where there is patience," he continued. "You see insignificance where there is humility. But do not mistake our silence for surrender. We are not here to beg for respect. We are here to demand it, because respect is the right of every nation, large or small." The hall erupted in murmurs, journalists scribbling furiously, others reaching for their phones to capture the moment. The crowd, once subdued, now sat taller, their eyes shining with pride. Traoré's words weren't just a defense against an insult. They were a declaration, a reminder that dignity cannot be given or taken away by foreign approval. He went further still, weaving history into his rebuttal. "For too long, Africa has been spoken to as though it were a child, as though our nations are incapable of deciding our own future. But the soil of our land carries the memory of centuries of resilience. Every river, every field, every village is proof that we have endured storms greater than condescension. And so, when you laugh at us, know this: you are not laughing at weakness. You are laughing at a people who have survived everything designed to break them. And still we stand." The applause that broke out wasn't forced. It wasn't half-hearted. It was explosive, thunderous, filling the hall with energy that could no longer be contained. Delegates who moments ago had sat silently now clapped with conviction. Others rose to their feet, recognizing that they were witnessing not just a rebuttal, but a turning point. And beyond the hall, as the video clip spread, the world began to notice. Social media lit up within minutes. Headlines flashed across digital screens. Traore responds with dignity. Foreign leaders' insult backfires. Burkina Faso's voice echoes worldwide. In every corner of the globe, people were sharing the clip, replaying the moment when arrogance was silenced by humility combined with strength. But what made it viral wasn't just the drama of confrontation. It was the contrast, the arrogance of a man in power undone by the calm firmness of a leader rooted in the dignity of his people. People recognized in Traoré's words something deeper, something that transcended politics. It was the idea that no one, no matter how powerful, has the right to strip another of their humanity. And so, the story didn't end in that hall. It spread far beyond, becoming a symbol, a lesson, and perhaps even a warning. In the hours after the confrontation, the video began traveling at a speed no one had anticipated. What had been intended as a closed-door diplomatic session quickly became a global spectacle. On platforms like Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook, short clips of Traoré's response were shared millions of times. The original insult was included in most clips, but viewers didn't focus on it for long. What captivated them was the way Traoré had transformed humiliation into triumph with nothing more than carefully chosen words. Comment sections exploded with support. "This is how you defend your people," wrote one user. Another said, "I don't know much about Burkina Faso, but this leader just earned my respect." Hashtags trended worldwide, not just in Africa. Hashtag Traoré, hashtag respect, and hashtag Africa Speaks were plastered across feeds in Europe, Asia, and the Americas. The response wasn't limited to Burkinabe citizens or Africans in general. It resonated with anyone who had ever felt belittled, disrespected, or underestimated. In local cafes in Ouagadougou, people huddled around televisions and smartphones replaying the clip. Older men nodded with approval, while younger citizens felt a surge of pride in seeing their leader refuse to be diminished. For a country that had often been described in headlines as poor or struggling, this moment shifted the narrative. Now, they weren't defined by hardship, they were defined by dignity. But while the public embraced Traoré's reply with admiration, the foreign leader and his delegation felt the sting of international embarrassment. What had begun as an attempt to assert dominance had backfired spectacularly. His office released a carefully worded statement, attempting to soften his remarks, insisting that they had been misinterpreted or taken out of context. Yet, the world had seen the smirk, heard the condescension, and watched the laughter that followed. Context couldn't erase arrogance. This contrast between the defensive backpedaling of the foreign leader and the unshaken confidence of Traoré only fueled the story further. News outlets replayed the two clips side by side, the insult followed by the response. Commentators dissected every gesture, every pause, every word. Analysts pointed out how Traoré had used history and humility as weapons more powerful than anger. They praised his ability to remain calm under pressure, showing strength without hostility. Inside Burkina Faso, the incident sparked deeper conversations. Teachers used the clip in classrooms to discuss dignity, self-respect, and the importance of standing firm. Religious leaders quoted Traoré's words in sermons, linking them to timeless principles of justice and equality. And for ordinary citizens, the moment became a source of empowerment. If their leader could stand tall against condescension on a global stage, then perhaps they too could carry themselves with more pride in their daily lives. But Traoré himself didn't bask in the attention. When asked about the viral moment during a later press conference, he simply shrugged. "I spoke as any leader should," he said. "Respect for our people is not negotiable." His humility only added to the admiration. He hadn't sought fame, nor had he engineered the confrontation. He had simply responded with dignity, and that authenticity was what made his words resonate worldwide. Still, not everyone celebrated. In some foreign capitals, his defiance was seen as dangerous. A young African leader who refused to bow could inspire others, and inspiration can be more disruptive than rebellion. Editorials appeared warning that leaders like Traoré risked destabilizing international relations, But to many Africans, those words rang hollow. How could dignity destabilize? Wasn't the real danger the arrogance that had triggered the moment in the first place? In a village outside Ouagadougou, an elder explained it perfectly. They expected us to stay silent, to accept humiliation as normal. But Traore showed them we are no longer willing to carry that burden. His words were not just his, they belonged to all of us. The viral clip also reached African diasporas across the world. In Paris, London, and New York, Africans living abroad shared it proudly, saying, "This is what leadership looks like." For many who had grown accustomed to seeing Africa portrayed negatively in Western media, this was a refreshing reversal. Here was an African leader commanding respect, not through force or threats, but through wisdom and composure. And beyond identity, the clip tapped into something universal. In every workplace, school, or community, there are those who have felt belittled by someone more powerful. Traore's words gave them a sense of validation. The message was clear. Dignity isn't granted by those above you. It exists within you, and when defended with courage, it shines brighter than any insult. Meanwhile, the foreign leader who had sparked the controversy found himself mocked in his own country. Late-night talk shows replayed the footage with biting commentary. Memes flooded the internet, casting him as the embodiment of arrogance undone. His attempt to diminish others had diminished him instead. The more he tried to explain, the worse it became. His smirk had become unforgettable, his laughter forever linked with humiliation. And so, what began as a moment of disrespect turned into a global lesson. Respect, once lost, cannot be reclaimed with excuses. Power, once challenged by truth, can never hide behind arrogance again. But the true brilliance of Traore's response was not just in what he said, it was in how he said it. He didn't meet insult with insult. He didn't descend into anger. He rose above it, and in doing so, he showed that leadership isn't about having the loudest voice, but the firmest conviction. Days later, in Burkina Faso, murals began appearing on walls, paintings of Traore standing tall, his words painted beside him. "Our place is not beneath your feet." The phrase became more than a rebuttal. It became a rallying cry. Students chanted it during gatherings, musicians wove it into songs, and activists held banners carrying the words during demonstrations. The moment had transcended politics. It had entered the realm of culture, identity, and national pride. And as the world continued to share the story, one thing became clear. Insults may fade, but dignity, once defended, leaves a mark that endures. As the dust settled, and the viral clip began to reach every corner of the globe, a quieter truth emerged. What had made the moment unforgettable wasn't the confrontation itself, but the deeper meaning behind it. Traore's words weren't just a reply to a single insult. They were a declaration, a line in the sand that spoke to centuries of history and generations of struggle. In the days that followed, international media continued to run headlines about the incident. But inside Burkina Faso, the conversation shifted to something more powerful. The pride of finally seeing their story told differently. For once, they weren't portrayed as victims or statistics, but as people with a leader who refused to bow. For once, the world wasn't laughing at them. It was applauding them. That shift mattered more than any trending hashtag. In schools, children reenacted the moment, pretending to be Traore at the podium. Teachers smiled as they watched young students take on his posture, his calm voice, and his defiance. It wasn't just play, it was empowerment. These children weren't dreaming of being invisible in the world anymore. They were imagining themselves standing tall, speaking with confidence, and demanding respect. Farmers in the countryside, many of whom rarely paid attention to international politics, heard about the reply through radio broadcasts. They nodded in satisfaction as they worked in the fields. "At last," one farmer said to his neighbor, "someone speaks for us, not against us." For them, Traore wasn't just a politician. He was a symbol that their sweat and labor, the backbone of the nation, deserved dignity too. Even among skeptics and critics, there was an acknowledgement that something had shifted. Some said the viral moment wouldn't solve poverty, hunger, or insecurity. And they were right. One speech cannot erase hardship. But what it did was change the lens through which the world looked at Burkina Faso. And sometimes, that change in perception is the first step to real transformation. Beyond Africa, the impact rippled. In Latin America, where countries had long felt patronized by global powers, commentators praised Traoré's courage. In Asia, where histories of colonialism were still raw, newspapers highlighted his reply as a universal lesson in standing up for sovereignty. His words were no longer just about Burkina Faso. They had become a rallying cry for every nation that had ever been looked down upon. Yet, Traoré remained grounded. When his advisors told him about the murals, the chants, and the songs inspired by his words, he simply smiled and said, "It is not about me. It is about all of us. They tried to insult you, not me. I only reminded them who we are." That humility struck people even harder than his fiery reply. Leaders who rise on ego often fall quickly. Leaders who rise on principle endure. The foreign leader who had made the insult, however, could not escape the shadow of the incident. His name became linked not with his policies, but with the moment he was silenced. For years to come, whenever he walked into a room, people remembered the viral clip. History can be unforgiving when arrogance collides with dignity. And while his reputation dwindled, Burkina Faso soared. The moment became a turning point, a reminder that in diplomacy, power is not measured only by military strength or economic size. Sometimes, it is measured by courage, the courage to say, "We will not be disrespected." The story of Traoré's viral reply became more than a headline. It became a legend, retold in markets, classrooms, and households. Parents reminded their children, "Always hold your head high. Do not let anyone make you feel small." Musicians turned the phrase into lyrics, echoing across radios late at night. Activists carried banners that quoted his words during protests for justice. In 1,000 ways, the moment multiplied far beyond the original confrontation. The lesson was universal. Respect cannot be begged for. It must be commanded. And dignity, once defended, inspires generations. As weeks turned into months, and the world slowly moved on to other stories, one thing remained constant. That clip of Traoré's reply was never forgotten. It lived online, replayed whenever another insult or slight arose. It resurfaced in moments of tension, reminding people that courage has no borders. And perhaps that is why the story resonated so deeply. It wasn't just about Burkina Faso. It wasn't just about Africa. It was about humanity. Every person who had ever been mocked, belittled, or dismissed saw themselves in that moment. And every person who had ever dreamed of answering back with dignity found hope in his words. In the end, the insult that was meant to diminish ended up elevating. The laughter that was supposed to humiliate ended up uniting. And the arrogance that was meant to dominate ended up defeated by nothing more than truth spoken with conviction. The final image of that day, Traoré standing tall, the foreign leader caught off guard, the room stunned into silence, would remain etched in memory, not as a clash of egos, but as a victory of respect over contempt. And so, history recorded not the insult but the reply, not the arrogance but the dignity, not the attempt to belittle but the courage to rise.